All right. Hey, Rob. How's it going?
Hi, Jenna. I'm doing great. California is probably the same as Massachusetts. Yeah, we're on week 8 of shelter in place. And for me, it's serving as a good opportunity to get in touch with some of my work and have these conversations with you and yourself.
Yeah, great. It's a nice day out here in Boston. We are here today. We're going to talk about the feet. I've been walking with my feet in the grass today, so
That's
uh,
awesome. Me
there's
too.
there's nothing better in Boston than when I can do that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I feel like the feet are underappreciated, neglected, and I'm hoping that kind of the different perspectives that we can bring to it will maybe shed some light on people and how they think about and feel their feet.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually had a request. One of our friends requested that we talk about the importance of training the feet. I think she's had some struggles with her feet and really wanted some recommendations. So,
Who
and
hasn't? Who
yeah, who
hasn't
hasn't
had
exactly?
struggle? Yeah.
And I agree. I think it's a really commonly ignored and hugely important part of the body. So I guess I'm gonna kind of just start out with asking you a question. Um, when, and maybe this is like way out of the box, but whatever. I actually want to know this. I don't know this for myself. Like, when did you have an aha moment that you were missing a huge piece of the puzzle and the huge piece was the feet? Like, when did you realize, like, oh no?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question. So I've never really been like that into like shoes and footwear in general. Like all throughout high school and college, as soon as the warm weather came in college in Florida, like I was always big on like just being barefoot. Okay. And then, but what I will say is that like in the gym environment and training realm, I was always wearing shoes, mainly because that's just like the culture if you go to a gym. And I think I was 25, and I went and I was working with this chiropractor from New Jersey, and we were having these conversations about rotational strength and rotational power, and how if you have weak feet, you're not going to be able to be as powerful and as strong as you want to be. And he put me through some really simple exercises, and I couldn't do them. So at first I'm like, hey, wait, I'm deadlifting like over 500 pounds in the gym. I'm squatting like over 300 pounds. Like I can do all these explosive big movements, but I couldn't simply rotate. And then he had me do some foot exercises, and I couldn't do them, and I was just boggled. And anyways, that kind of introduced me to the fact that I was like, I am neglecting something, because what he had me do is he had me do some foot exercises, walk on the rocks for about 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden I could do these movements more easily. So whether it was placebo or not, he was just showing me that giving some really small signals to my feet went upstream to the rest of my body. So that was my mid 20s. Yeah,
Okay. Wow. Um,
I'm repositioning my camera.
okay.
Uh, so why did you want to talk about the feet? I mean, we got this question from our listener and friend, but
Yeah.
why did you think it was important as a trainer and someone that works with people's bodies?
Yeah. So, like, because it's almost like I feel like it's like this big like secret. It shouldn't be a secret, but that like it is so I think still out of the box to suggest that you take your shoes off, or suggest that you do your exercises without your shoes on, or suggest that you even walk around your house without socks on. Like, people are like, why? They're like,
They
why
think
would
they think it's weird, right?
it's weird. They're like, why would I do that? And I know from my own experience, but then also now working with people, what, like, when it comes to your balance, your strength, your muscular endurance, your coordination, your vestibular system, like, just probably every aspect of training. I'm probably leaving out a million aspects of like why we're training. If you do not have your shoes on, your training experience is, in my opinion, like, the quality and the improvement is like is ginormous compared to having your shoes on. Obviously, maybe someone has a specific condition where they like need their shoes on. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, your everyday run of the mill person. And also like I have a lot of people who have foot pain, but they just think it's normal, or they just think that it's part of getting old, right? People love blaming like their aches and pains on aging. So
Yeah.
um, that's why I think it's really important and valuable to talk about. And someone might start listening and still be like, what? Like, why do we need to care about the feet? But like, just think about like there are 26 bones and 33 joints in your foot alone.
Yeah, that's
Like,
crazy. That's pretty much as many like vertebrae you have in your spine, and I don't maybe the same or more joints, probably like the same amount of joints in your spine. That's crazy, you know?
yeah, that it is crazy. And we like this, Tom Myers talks about them. He calls shoes you mentioned shoes in the beginning, like sensory deprivation chambers, but like we don't put our hands in like, we put them in gloves in the winter, but we need our hands. We use them all day and that's normal, but we lock our feet away, and those
Yeah,
33 joints don't get the movement, the articulation they need. We're all kind of walking downhill because almost every shoe has some type of heel, and then everything
yeah,
is smushed in the toe box,
yeah.
and all of the rest of our body is stacked on top of it. And
It's like,
it's
yeah.
yeah, you go. I
Well,
get
well,
I get
it's the
fired up.
foundation, right? It's the
It's
foundation.
the
It's like
foundation.
when you start talking about like the toe box squishing our feet and almost deforming our feet, making our feet fit this like mold of a little casket, right? That's what I think of shoes as, is like there's little caskets for our feet. And anyways, like the bones smushed together, and you just think of like the circulatory issues that's going to arise out of that. Like you're not going to get as efficient blood flow or neural activity or movement of fluids in your ankle and foot if like everything's just crammed together. uh and I think that's one of the things is like when people are wearing shoes, they we almost do it uh, subconsciously, right? Like we do it without even, it's not even just realizing it. We do it because we think it's serving a purpose, right? Oh, I go exercise, I put shoes on, I walk, I'm in the house, I have my indoor shoes. But like we're not really thinking about the ramifications of essentially like sticking our feet in these deprivation tanks for hours on end every day. And so that's where
Every
I
day
think a
for
lot of,
40 years.
oh yeah, for 40 years. And I loved what you said about people, they have foot pain, they almost think it's normal, not even if it's aging. Like I know a lot of young people and they think I have a flat foot, and they just think like I've had a flat foot since I was 5 and I have flat feet. And they go through their whole life thinking that the foot can't change. And although Rome wasn't built in a day, over time, I've seen people's arches come back. I've seen my own feet, also in clients' feet. I've seen people who have high arches learn to lower the arches. I've seen people with no arches develop arches. I mean, this is not an impossible quest. It's one that requires time. Uh, anyways, like we don't have to be a victim of circumstances with our feet.
Yeah, totally, I agree. And as you were talking, I was thinking like, okay, you know, for the person who's sort of like, all right, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to move through the world without shoes on. Like that's not how our society works.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah,
That's not at all what we're like proposing or suggesting. But then I might go back to that person and say like, okay, well, you like, then why do you train? And I would say that, we could, and that's a huge question, but a lot of us train to move better, to feel better, and to do what our daily lives don't do for us, right? To get the movement nutrients that we don't get from our daily lives.
hmm,
And if you are headed to the gym with that intention, and I think I know it's abroad, but I think mostly everyone who's going to the gym is recognizing that they're going to get something that they're not getting in their day-to-day life. They're going to get something else. And I think that's when we come in as trainers and sort of like be enthusiasts to try
huh,
to like propose or suggest or highly recommend that you go and do your workout. And even if you did nothing else but work out without your shoes on, you would already be doing yourself such a huge service. Because, and you can even talk a little bit more about like, you know, ground force tension and what waking up the feet like actually means in a training context. But even if like this conversation started to overwhelm someone and they were like, I don't know how to do foot exercises, like that's fine. Just take your shoes off and walk around and
Take your shoes off.
do your normal exercises without your shoes on, and you'll be already like way ahead of the game.
Yeah, and if this is a foreign concept to you, what I would say is start with socks, wear your socks. Eventually, I think you'll get to a place where the socks aren't going to be so comfortable to wear. And it's almost like you're going to have a choice, like, do I do the shoe or do I take the socks off? I had somebody the other day, they took their shoes off for me. And I was like, I need you to take your socks off. And they said, I really don't want to take my socks off. And I said, why? They said, I really don't like my feet. And what I told them is that this 99% of people do not like their feet. I feel so sorry for all our feet out there. Like everyone is like ashamed of their feet. But anyways, I think walking without shoes is one thing. Also just walking without socks around the house, it really starts to allow you to feel more like you have as many proprioceptive like nerves in your hands and face as you do in your feet. So we take in the environment with our hands, we take in the elements with our face, but we can do the same thing with our feet when the socks are off. The second thing that happens when you take your shoes and socks off is now you pay attention a little bit more. So a lot of times if you're walking around the house with shoes on, you're not going to necessarily pay attention to your feet, your foot placement. And sometimes that actually leads to you not having great spatial awareness because you don't have to think about your feet. You just exist in shoes. The moment you take your shoes off, you start to pay attention more, because if you don't, you're going to stub your toe, you're going to whack your toe. You almost start to become more aware of your environment. And that was one of the things, like, I wanted you to talk a little bit about just like foot care, foot practices, for somebody who's thinking, oh, I'm overwhelmed by this. Like what sorts of things do you do just to take care of your feet that are simple?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like, oh gosh, try not to use the word interesting, but there I go using it. It's something, I think we can, I want to pause and say like, well, when as a culture, as a society, when we think of foot care, I think a lot of people think of like going and getting a pedicure, like,
Mm-hmm.
or somehow like
Orthotics.
Yeah, like really cushiony shoes, or
Yeah.
like really supportive shoes, right? Like we don't even have time to get into like all the nuances of supportive shoes, but suffice it to say that that's not what you mean when you ask me that question, what do I do to take care of my feet?
Yeah.
In the sense that like I would argue that like anytime that I'm wearing shoes or trying, like I would say that that's probably just, that's time that I'm not taking care of my feet during those times. So some simple things that I like to do. One, like this is so simple, move my toes. So like a lot of us don't ever think about just trying to wiggle our toes. Like, and that's something simple. You can do that. Someone can do that at their desk, like even
Yeah.
with their shoes on if they didn't want to take them off. Like start to wiggle your toes. That's super simple. Walking around in the grass, or even like I know some people they're worried about they get dirty. They don't like dirty. Like okay, walk around inside without your shoes on, like you said. Try to walk on some different textures, like
Yeah.
even like that's huge. Any different surface, even in your house, like anything like that is really simple. And a huge thing I do to take care of my feet, which I had to take a deep breath because it's hard as like a woman in 2020 who's trying to like look good or whatever I'm supposed to do. Like I do my best to never wear high heels, and I do my best to never really wear shoes that aren't shaped like feet. So if anyone ever wanted like recommendations for websites, like there are companies and there is a wavelength and a group of people out there that are on this wavelength. They're creating shoes that are shaped like feet. They're not that ugly, like, right, if you're worried about
Yeah,
aesthetics.
no,
And
they're actually they're
they're
getting fashionable. They really
right.
are.
They are. So one of the biggest things I do is I wear those types of shoes when I do wear shoes. Try to limit, if ever, wear high heels. Like high heels is its own sort of discussion, but it's worth mentioning just because so many women feel like pressure that there's so much to it, right? We're when you're taller, it's like I don't know. There's so much like societal expectations around high heels. So um, we don't have to get into that, but that's one of the biggest things that I try to do. And I notice a huge difference. Like, yeah, you're getting your foot out. This is amazing. Do
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit about?
Well, I just want to talk about the high heel thing because even though
Okay.
it's a cultural conversation, like essentially, like this is your foot, okay? And when you force your foot into a heel, what it does with the whole big toe is like the big toe has to like kind of jam in. So all the toes they kind of like fold into one another. This doesn't do justice on the camera. And then the big toe to kind of meet with the other toes is it goes crooked, so it becomes almost pointy. Your foot almost becomes like an arrow when you're pushing wearing the heels, okay? And then this leads to like another conversation is like bunions. Like
Bunions,
bunions
which
are
I
an issue for
wanted to talk
men
about,
and women.
and
I think
women. Yeah.
more women,
Hmm.
but yeah, and we don't people. I've worked with so many people who they wish they could do something about their bunions, and I see these same people wearing the arrow shoes, and if you saw what that heel does, is it puts that big toe into a bunion position. So it's like, how can we help our feet? And
Yeah.
to your point, getting out of the heels, I think that's so important. I think for women in the modern day, I don't agree with heels. I think if a woman wants to dress up and it's like part of the style or something,
Um, yeah.
yeah.
And that, I
I
mean,
I I have I don't like it, but like I'm
it,
not a woman in this culture, so I don't
right.
want to
And
speak what I don't know.
there's this, like, there's a specific type of like empowerment, or like if I'm getting ready with my friends, like if and I say, okay, heels or flats, like 10 out of 10 times my friends are going to say, wear the heels, those look better, so there is like a big societal cultural component to
That's
heels.
crazy, Jenna. I
10,
didn't know
10 out of
that.
10 times. Oh yeah. But
Oh my God.
with that said, okay, I want to come back to the bunions for a second because I have a bunion, and I was taught that they're genetic and that my dad has them and my grandmother had them and that it makes sense that I have it. And I remember being in high school and it throbbing and everyone's like, oh, you're screwed. It's genetic. And then I remember where I was on the street. I was listening to a Katie Bowman podcast about bunions and feet, and she presented all the science and the research that says, lo and behold, it is not genetic, and you can actually, reverse it as long as, depending on how old you are and your history and your experience and all the
Yeah.
things. And I started going down this rabbit hole, and so I've been sort of doing this for like 2-ish years, and like my bunion is actually improving. It's slow, right? It's not like you can't really change bone deformation overnight. Like but I see noticeable differences in my feet since I started or stopped wearing shoes that aren't shaped like feet, stopped wearing heels so much, like walking barefoot, waking up my feet, right? All these things have actually helped. And I'm 26. So, and I have clients who are like now in their 70s, and, their doctors really want them to get bunion surgery. So I'm not going to say if they started doing all of these lifestyle changes that their bunions are going to go away, but I think that's why it's great to have these conversations for people now so that they can actually start to make these changes. Like I know people have foot pain, and one other thing we didn't mention, and then I'm going to go
Yeah.
back to you so I stop rambling, but not just the bunion thing with the heels is like the pelvis and the hams, like what it does to like your rib, your spine,
Upstream.
upstream, right? Everything, it travels upstream and everything gets a little displaced. And now 1 or 2 times, that's not, our bodies are adaptable, right? But constant over and over again, it's gonna low back pain, right? Like all the things can kind of be traced back to some of
I
these
mean,
heels.
rib
So
cage,
anyway,
diaphragm,
yeah,
shoulders, neck, head. I mean,
yeah,
to it's if you can think about this in terms of building a house and It's so simple. I feel like this is like elementary school, but it's hard to break out of cultural norms and habits. And it's like you build a house, and no matter how cool you want to make your house on the second and third floor, the more solid your foundation is, you're going to have a lot of possibilities and flexibility with what you do above it. And so our foot is just that. Like our foot is
Yeah.
the foundation. The toe bone is connected to the ankle bone is connected to the knee bone to the hip to the pelvis to the low back goes to the thoracics to the ribs. It just goes all the way up. And so if you're like, oh, I'm exercising and I'm training all the time, and you think you're doing your full body workouts, but you're wearing shoes,
You're
I'm
missing
thinking,
some
yeah,
parts, right?
I'm thinking like, I'm thinking you haven't done your foundation work, and you're just worried about your second and third floor, and like you're not at all that not worried. You're not thinking about the foundation. You're thinking about like more the aesthetics of everything else, and you're just putting the foot away.
So I'm curious,
And
what
yeah,
do you usually like? I'm going to ask the same question back to you. Like, what are some simple things that you recommend to the person who's starting at square one? This is a novel idea to them. Did I
yeah.
leave anything out? Like, do you have any other thoughts, suggestions?
Well,
And
I
then
love everything.
maybe we can
I
also
love what
then
you.
talk about like some more advanced things for people who are already on this wavelength. But I want you to
Yeah,
go first. Yeah.
everything you said is great, and those are all practices I have. Barefoot's in the house. I'm like kind of I'm strict at my house, and if people come over to my home, I kind they take their shoes off. I don't know why. My best friend was South Korean growing up. That's how we did it at his house. I don't allow shoes in my house, and so uh, this one time, because my wife Jess, she's like into it. She's gotten into it. But at first, like her friends would come over, and I'd be like, "I'm telling your friends to take their shoes off," and she'd be like, like almost like, why do I have to have like the husband who's like going to like reprimand people for wearing shoes?
Right.
And
Oh God.
I made this joke about how I feel like I'm giving them a gift, like I'm getting them barefoot. So anyways, like barefoot at home, I think is really important. Like getting out of this slipper habit. We are addicted to cushy, comfortable, warm, soft, snuggly things. And I think we have to get back to our biological blueprint a little bit more. So walking outside is really nice if you have the luxury of living near some grass and it's summertime and you can just slip your sandals off. Different textures are going to stimulate your nerves a bit differently. I roll my feet. I use lacrosse balls. I
Yeah.
use tennis balls. I roll my feet. I do pressure points. The other thing I really like is massaging. I just, after you take a shower or something, get into bed, and like before you do
Yeah.
whatever else you do, or if you're just watching television, just get some lotion. Spend 2 to 5 minutes per foot. It helps to increase the circulation. And again, like the blood in your foot is the same blood in your brain. Like the fluids of the body move throughout. And I think that's really good. I slap my feet once in a while. Slapping them just helps wake up the nerves and shock the bones a bit.
Okay.
And
I
I'm
like
trying to
that.
think. Yeah, I think those are the big things. I mean, yeah, I move my ankles every day. If you've never heard this statistic before, the ankle absorbs more shock than any other joint in the body. So that's kind of big. Like your ankle
Right.
absorbs more shock and more force than any other joint in the body. And the ankle has such a close, intimate relationship to the foot. So if you ever work with young people, and I'm sure you have, like ankle sprains are really common. And ankle sprains don't have to happen all the time if we were just kind of training the feet differently. I think we're walking around the world with really weak feet and really weak ankles. And I think that's a recipe for disaster for our knees, our hips, and our low backs. I think it's just
Yeah.
a fucking mess. And I want people to, if you could take one thing away from this, I want you to stop wearing shoes so damn much. Um,
So, question, and I kind of know the answer, but I think it would be interesting because where do you like this idea of supportive shoes came from somewhere, right? I think people go to their podiatrists and they go and they get their cortisone shots and they ask, what should I do? And they are prescribed like orthotics and supportive shoes. So what do you, those people, like your clients that come to you and say like, oh, my podiatrist told me, how do you like to explain or have that conversation of actually like that's more of a band-aid, like it would benefit, you know what I mean? Like how do you usually like to approach that? Because I think I can imagine someone listening to this and getting confused, like, but my doctor told me that I should wear supportive shoes. Why are these
Yeah,
two trainers saying otherwise? Like how do you like to explain that? I know there's a million different ways to explain it, but
yeah, and I think we have to be careful because each individual is so different.
yeah.
For me, it's a case by case basis. Bone remodeling is a thing. If you don't know what bone remodeling is, you can look it up on Google. But like essentially, like our bones can change shape. Our bones are considered soft connective tissue, just like muscles. They have a higher level of calcium in them, and that's what helps, and other nutrients that solidify them. But like I have the conversation with people that essentially like you can change the structure of your bone, of the feet in your bones by changing the the muscle relationships of the lower leg and upper leg, because muscles are what hold bones in place. If you want to change the position of a bone in somebody, you have to work different muscles to so that two or three muscles start to move a bone so that maybe you have a little bit more of an arch, or so that you have a little bit more of a downed arch. I don't know how I talk to people about it. It's so individual because some people
Individual.
are kind of, they roll their eyes and they're like, "You're not a doctor." And I'm like, "I'm not a doctor, but like, I have no foot pain." And like, "Sure, I'm only half your age." Uh, and this is why we're having these conversations, because
Station.
I don't want our generation to be part of this statistic of people who are addicted to exercise in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and then they're being told the same garbage from previous generations that like it's hereditary, you need support, uh, when really it's like, well, if you just started changing the way you trained and gave a 10% concentration to your feet, you could prevent a lot of these issues down the road. So I
Yeah,
don't know if that
totally.
answered your
No,
question,
it
but
does.
like,
It's
you
helpful. It
know how
makes a
it
lot of
is.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like people only really want to hear what they want to hear, and I think I, I've I think more importantly is I've worked with a lot of people who have foot, ankle, knee, hip, low back pain, and they adopt the idea of not wearing shoes at home as much, going out in their backyard barefoot a little bit, doing some heel raises, doing some exercises to condition their Achilles tendon. And these people, I have seen them, they're like those daily chronic pains start to diminish. Uh, if you don't do the work, it's not like if you have like no arches and you stop wearing shoes and you don't do anything else, like I'm not guaranteed that could actually make things worse. Like you have to like kind of apply corrective exercises to a bare foot. Uh, if you've never
Yeah.
worked out before, you're overweight, and you hear this and you start not wearing shoes, it could get worse. Like shit, like it could, because you could be putting more force into the wrong places. Like
Right.
you need
Or
to
even if
start.
you're not overweight, like if you just have never done this before, like you don't, that's a really good point. We didn't mention any of that. Like you don't want to jump into this full force. You don't go from 0 to 100. Like you never
Yeah,
want to go
no.
from 100% like shoes, like all the time and never taking the shoes off to trying to walk barefoot for a long period. You got to start with 5 minutes. Like,
I loved what you said. Wiggle your toes. Like if you haven't looked at your feet like for more than like 3 minutes in the past year, like just wiggle your toes and see what you can do with your toes. And like
um,
that's such a great safe place to start.
yeah. And as you were talking, something else that sort of came to mind is like, because I was also thinking like, all right, why why should why like when I think of my friends or I think of people that don't just like love having this type of conversation, right? They think I'm like weird, like a weirdo for caring about this. I feel like I can actually make a good argument for anyone in the sense of like I have friends who strictly train to like lose weight or to look thin or to whatever. Like that's like their goal. I have clients who strictly train to improve their balance because they're worried about their balance. I have clients who strictly train to manage their stress. Some who like everyone has a different like motivation or goal. Some people do it just so they can play with their kids and not have pain or not worry about not have to worry about falling over at the supermarket when they reach for their can of soup, right? So
Yeah.
everyone has different like things that are important to them, totally. And I think starting to think about your feet would help all of those groups of people that I just said. And again, like you said, like it's hard to make huge generalizations. Like we can't make like specific recommendations for people in a conversation like this, but definitely something to start thinking about if you're not already. And then a question I had for you is, where do you see like room for the fitness industry to expand here? Like, how do we start to talk about this in much a more like massive macro way instead of just like searching the Foot Collective on Instagram and like they have a certain amount of followers, but it's like I still feel like it's not common knowledge that it's still frowned upon in gyms to not wear your shoes, right? So like
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
I have no idea. Gyms make you wear shoes because it's a liability. Because if you drop something on your toe and it breaks, they like that's why for that and hygiene purposes is like why you have to wear shoes at gyms. I have no idea. I really don't know. I think people listening to this and people who are, like you said, going on the Foot Collective and well, they're kind of like they're curious about fitness and health, and they're learning that the shoes are working against them. I think people almost just taking a stand at the gym, and somebody they're working out in the corner doing their fitness thing. Somebody says, "Hey, you got to wear shoes," and they say, "Well, like." Kind of standing up for your own health and standing up for your feet. I've done it at gyms, and I can think of one or two times where I've left gyms, and I'm like, well, I'm not okay with this. You told me I could be a member. I'm doing my own thing. I have socks. I clean all the equipment off. Why can't I do my 10 exercises without shoes on? It's not even like I'm walking around barefoot in the gym. I'm staying in my corner
Corner.
so I don't know what the future has. I think just people like you and I, fitness professionals, health coaches, personal trainers, body workers, I think people speaking up for the foot. We're speaking up for the poor feet, the poor feet
Right.
that everybody is so ashamed of.
So ashamed of, those don't pay attention to, nor don't realize how important. Yeah, it's yeah. All right, that's helpful. Yeah, I hope that,
Yeah.
and I think that's also why we wanted to have this conversation to expand the dialogue around this, bring some awareness to it. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
ignored and it's sad.
It is sad, and I hope you can hear the sincerity of Jenna's and my voice, because uh, we do care about like you being comfortable in your own skin. And what we are merely suggesting is that by starting to pay attention to your feet a little bit more and giving them a little TLC could actually positively influence uh, the health of the rest of your body and your mind. And if you're in a relationship, I mean, giving your partner a foot rub is such an expressive way of like giving gratitude and like expressing your love and
Yeah.
care.
And if
And
you're
if you
not in a
do it,
relationship, you can just
you can also do it for
massage your
yourself.
own
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah. Like people are
I
always
love
like
that.
the idea of like self massage, I think it's really confusing. If you're like, people don't really know how to touch themselves. That's a whole nother conversation, but like people don't know how to touch themselves. We're not taught how to touch ourselves in tender, just caring, soothing ways. Like I just think about like belly rubs and like rubbing my ribs and all this stuff that I do for my body. And so anyway, self massage and self care can actually be really simplified by just saying, hey, just like rub some lotion on your feet and your hands, like that's it. And just like kind of start there, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
as
that's it.
as we kind of wrap up, I think we're winding our conversation down. Some last minute thoughts are, one, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, this makes sense, I'm on board, but I'm embarrassed to either like, I mean, I think a lot of people are at home right now, so I think a lot of people are okay, like they're at home, but I think some people are like embarrassed to like walk in the grass barefoot. Like I know my friends will like make fun of me or think I'm a weirdo or whatever. But like just I'm here to just be like, it's okay. Like you're just taking care of yourself. Like it's not that weird. It actually makes a lot of sense. Like I don't know if that's helpful to anyone, but just throwing it out there. And then my other sort of like advice is if you're listening to this and you're not sure like for you specifically where to start, then like again we kind of say this every time, but like reach out to somebody that knows like a trainer or someone that kind of can help guide you as far as like where to start, because again
Or
you
us.
don't, yeah, or us, like I'm always either of us are always happy to talk about this, just in the sense of like you don't, I would never want anyone to like throw away their shoes and go barefoot running, like
Yeah, no, that's
my
not what we're
brain,
saying.
like you know what I mean, goes to like worry. Feel free to throw out your flip flops, limit your high heels, like limit your other shoes. That's not gonna harm you if you just do that immediately. But if you're not sure like how to start training them or what to do, just make sure you reach out to someone for assistance. So no injuries or anything like that. Do you have any last minute thoughts or
No, I
ideas?
loved. Nope, no, that was beautiful. That was really well
Okay,
said.
great. Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day. It's only,
Yeah,
what
I'm
time is
looking
it
forward to
there?
our next conversation. It's 2:45.
Okay, yeah. All right. I'm gonna stop the recording.